At Christmas dinner last year, my mother handed out presents to everyone seated around the glowing table. Except me. The warm golden lights strung across her dining room cast a soft, festive haze over everything. Laughter bubbled up like champagne as brightly wrapped boxes with shiny bows were passed from hand to hand. My siblings tore into their gifts with exaggerated delight, while cousins and aunts exclaimed over each reveal. I sat at the far end of the long table, the wooden chair legs slightly uneven beneath me, staring at the empty space in front of my plate. No box. No ribbon. Just a faint ring of condensation from my water glass. I tried to pretend it didn't feel like a spotlight burning directly onto my absence. My uncle leaned back in his chair, belly full and voice booming, when my mother said loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Nora, be grateful you can even sit here." The rest of the table joined in, their chuckles rippling around me like I was the punchline of a joke I was never meant to understand. Something inside me went very still, very clear. A kind of quiet resolve settled in my chest, sharp as a scalpel. I lifted my glass of cheap sparkling cider, forced a calm smile that didn't reach my eyes and said evenly, "Good to know. My name is Nora Vale. For the past 4 years, I had been the invisible backbone of this family. I paid my mother's rent every month, covered her utilities when they ran late, stocked the groceries so no one went hungry, and quietly funded nearly half the cost of the very family celebration she loved to claim as her own proud achievements. I was 30 years old, working brutal night shifts as a nurse in the ER, where I watched people fight for their lives while I quietly kept my own family's life afloat. I was the reason that house stayed warm through winter after winter, the lights stayed on, and the fridge stayed full. Yet my family never once said thank you. Instead, they told me I was lucky to be able to help. Lucky. As if my exhaustion, my sacrificed savings, and my sleepless days were some kind of privilege. That Christmas Eve had unfolded exactly as so many others had before. I arrived carrying the heavy, still warm casserole my mother had specifically ordered me to make. Extra cheese, just how my brother liked it. She opened the door without a hug, barely glancing at me, and scolded, "You're 10 minutes late, Nora. Everyone's already here." She pointed me straight toward the kitchen like hired help, not her daughter. A cheap metal folding chair waited for me at the table, the only one that didn't match the polished wooden seats. It creaked loudly when I sat down. I smiled politely through dinner, listening to stories I had funded but was never fully part of. Then came the gifts. 13 of them. My mother passed them out one by one with theatrical flair, watching faces light up as expensive sweaters, gadgets, and jewelry emerged. Every single item had been bought with money I transferred into her account just days earlier. Not one had my name on it. When I finally spoke up, voice quiet but steady, "Mom, was there one for me?" She cut me off sharply. "Be grateful you can sit here with your family." My younger brother, lounging in his new coat, piled on with a smirk, "At least we still remember your name, right?" The whole room erupted in laughter again, glasses clinking, eyes shining with holiday cheer. No one noticed the way my hands trembled slightly under the table. That was the moment I folded my napkin neatly, placed it beside my untouched plate, and decided I was done. Done feeding a table that always made room for everyone except me. The truth, I realized later that night, was far older than that single painful evening. I had been the responsible one since I was 16, when my stepfather walked out without warning and my mother simply shut down, retreating into her room for days at a time. I became the adult in the house overnight. I cooked dinners from whatever was in the pantry, cleaned until my hands were raw, watched my little sister after school, and worked part-time at a local diner to cover groceries and school supplies. I studied late into the night with textbooks balanced on the kitchen counter while pots simmered. When I won first place in the regional science fair in high school, my project on emergency triage protocols that I had poured weeks into, my mother took the medal off the refrigerator the very next day. "We need the space for your sister's birthday party list," she said casually. The medal quietly disappeared into a drawer somewhere. I told myself it didn't matter. I was used to disappearing. Years later, after I graduated nursing school and became a registered nurse, the phone calls began in earnest. Always in that same soft, trembling, panicked voice I knew too well. "Nora, honey, I'm short on rent this month. Just until I get back on my feet." I sent the money. Every time. Then came the overdue electric bill, the broken down car that had to be fixed, the sudden gap in my sister's tuition, the inflated Christmas budget, and the endless string of emergencies that never seemed to end. By the time I clearly recognized the pattern for what it was, an endless cycle of quiet exploitation, I was already deep in it, paying for everyone else's comfort and calling it love. Love that was never returned, only expected. After that Christmas dinner, I drove home through quiet streets decorated with twinkling lights, my chest tight. I sat at my own small kitchen table, opened my banking app and stared at 4 years of transfers, 48 months of rent payments, grocery runs, utility bills, and so-called family gifts. The numbers blurred together. I printed every single statement, highlighted every line in cold, unyielding yellow marker until the pages felt heavy with proof. Then I pulled out the apartment lease from my file box. The unit was in my name alone. My mother and sister were listed only as occupants. My uncle, who had been living there rent-free for over a year, wasn't listed at all. On January 1st, with a steady hand, I sent the property manager my 30-day notice of non-renewal. On January 2nd, I scanned and emailed my sister the highlighted bank statements with one simple line: "You deserve the truth." By nightfall, she texted back, her message full of disbelief. "Is this real? Nora, tell me this isn't real." My grandmother was the only person who had ever loved me without keeping a receipt. When I sat with her a few days later and showed her the statements, she went quiet for a long, heavy time, her teacup trembling slightly in her hands. Then she said, voice low and full of sorrow, that my mother had been lying to the entire family for years. 2 days later, she called my mother and asked one direct, unflinching question: "Who pays the rent?" My mother tried to twist her way out of it with her usual performance, excuses, tears, and blame shifting, but my grandmother ended the call with words I will carry forever. "I raised you better than this, but I did not raise you well enough." When the official notice arrived at the apartment, my mother showed up pounding on my apartment door with my uncle and 2 other relatives in tow, their faces stormy. She demanded loudly, "How could you do this to your own family, Nora? After everything we've been through?" I opened the door calmly, my grandmother already on speakerphone for support. I looked them each in the eyes and told them the number out loud. $57,600. That's how much I paid into a life that never had room for me. My uncle looked down at his shoes. My sister started crying quietly behind them. My mother turned pale, then began shouting that I was destroying the family, tearing us apart. I told her calmly, "I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply refusing to keep funding the lie." Then I reminded her that the lease expired at the end of the month and quietly closed the door on their protests. They were gone by February. My mother moved in with my aunt and, for the first time in years, had to learn how to split bills and manage her own finances. My sister got a part-time job at a coffee shop and began paying her own way through school. One evening she called me, voice small and genuine, and apologized for every Christmas she had stayed silent. I told her gently, "You weren't responsible for Mom's choices, only for what you choose to do next." We met for dinner the following week, just the 2 of us at a quiet little Italian place. No expectations. No performances. For the first time in years, it felt like breathing after holding my lungs shut for far too long. We talked for hours, real talk, the kind that heals. Today I keep my life smaller and truer. I work my night shifts with a clearer mind, pay my own bills without resentment, and save the money I once gave away so freely. I've started taking small joys for myself again. Quiet mornings with coffee and a book, weekend hikes, time with friends who actually see me. My grandmother calls every Sunday without fail, her voice warm and proud. My sister sends me photos of her paychecks with proud little captions like, "First one I earned myself." My mother has sent one heartfelt apology and 3 carefully worded requests for money since then. I replied to the apology with kindness but boundaries. I ignored the rest. I don't hate her. I simply stopped paying for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. And for the first time in my adult life, the table in front of me, set by my own hands in my own space, finally feels like mine.